Welcome to the newest episode of Athletics for Life podcast. This episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. We have contacted some gentlemen with Ethos Recruiting. They are a company that helps international school athletes get recruited to play sports in the United States. And so we've kind of collaborated with them to set up a webinar for some of our student athletes that we can then also share with our larger audience.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to have Mark, Chris, and Jeremy on the podcast today. They will do a 35-minute webinar about their company, Ethos Sport and Education. And at the end, we have a Q&A session where some of our students and our university counselor will ask some questions. So we're very excited to have a bit of a different podcast today, and we hope you can take something away from it. So yeah, enjoy our podcast.
Yeah, enjoy.
Well, thank you guys very much, and thank you for having us, and thanks everybody for joining us. We're really excited to share this with you. My name is Mark Lincier. I'm the Senior Recruiting Director for Ethos Sports and Education. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, was a college soccer player, was actually the first person in my family to graduate from a 4-year university because my mom and dad just had to work so hard from a young age, so it was a big deal in my family. It was an amazing experience, and I learned a lot from it. I really do enjoy being able to help younger people like yourself with the university pathway. And Chris and I teamed up about 8 years ago and have been doing this every day since. I want to introduce the founder and owner of Ethos Sports and Education, Chris Campuzano, who will take it from here, and then I'll be in for a few sections along the way.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Chris Campuzano. I'm the founder of Ethos Sports and Education. Started the company about 10 years ago because we did see that even though there were other companies that did what we did, there was no other company that focused on the two most important things that we thought that needed to be thought of during the recruiting process, which is academics first and finding the right social fit. I've been out of college since 1993, and since I graduated, I've been in a variety of different roles within the sports industry, from the amateur level to the pro level. Right out of university, I managed a facility here in Arizona where we trained Olympians from all around the world at high altitude. So teams would fly in, they would train, and from there we had college coaches that would come trying to recruit those athletes. And it just built that Rolodex over the last 25 to 30 years. And now, there is not another company between Mark and I. We have relationships with about 90 to 95% of the universities here in the US and in Canada. So there is not another company with the reach that we have. And we really focus on the academics, which you'll hear a lot of during our presentation. So to start off the conversation this evening, obviously the big thing that's affected recruiting in college sports in general over the last year has been COVID. And there's been many ways that it has been affected. First and foremost is that the NCAA for over a year now has banned in-person recruiting, which means coaches could not have athletes on campus. They could not travel to go see athletes if there were any that were even competing here in the US, whether that was domestic or abroad. They have just announced about a week or so ago that will be dropping at the end of May. And now coaches, in the last week, both Mark and I have gotten probably 100 emails from coaches all around the country that have started to announce summer camps, which means they're going to go extremely fast because this has been the first time that most athletes have not been able to be in front of coaches. So the fact that coaches are able to be out and recruiting again means that any needs that they have will probably be filling up relatively quickly, especially for the 21, if not the 22 class. The NCAA at the end of last year also announced that they were going to provide 1 extra year of eligibility for anyone that was currently on a team. So if, for example, anyone that competes at the college level here in the US or the university level gets 4 years of eligibility. So anyone now on a team gets a total of 5, which means that also affected how coaches are recruiting. So for anyone, when a coach is recruiting for any sport, they can look at their roster and say, hey, we've got these 2 athletes that are graduating this year, these 3 graduating next year, and they can put together a plan. So now they don't know, and some coaches aren't pushing very hard to find that out, but this is a domino effect for the next 4 years, which means that those students might tell them now that they might stay for that extra year, and in 2 years, they might decide not to stay. So there's going to be, a lot of issues with recruiting over the next 2, 3, and even 4 years until those coaches hear from every athlete that's deciding whether they're taking that year. We've talked to coaches that literally have 2 players on 1 scholarship because they had someone that committed before COVID, and then after COVID with this new rule, they had to then provide the person who they thought was leaving that extra year. So there's a lot of things that are changing, and it's almost changing on a daily basis. During COVID, coaches have been a lot more selective in some sports, especially at the higher level at Division I. They're looking for national team recruits or for recruits that compete at tournaments, competitions, or leagues that they're familiar with to make that transition more and more, easier for them to bring someone in that's going to be able to perform or have an impact quicker than someone that's just coming in from anywhere in the world. The other thing that's happening right now is the transfer portal, which, talking to coaches over the last few weeks, it's becoming a circus, which basically now the NCAA has allowed athletes that were at a current university to basically go onto this database and put their names out for other coaches to recruit them. And it's becoming an epidemic. The COVID has really caused a lot of people to think that they're not getting the exposure that they need in sports where maybe they can go pro afterwards, but just because they maybe didn't make that right choice when they came over, and now they're looking to move out of a university and go someplace else. So there are a lot of things that are causing issues for those that are trying to come over with kids that are already here competing at the university level. On the admission front, obviously COVID has caused the SAT or the ACT, which are the entrance tests, to be delayed. So a lot of universities this year and even going into next year are going test optional. And we've talked with a lot of high academic schools like the Ivy Leagues and schools like Claremont, McKenna, Bates that are going test optional for next year. And in some cases, they're actually reviewing if they're going to even allow or take the SAT after 2022. This has been a great time for them to kind of look at their admissions requirements and decide maybe they might not even require that moving forward. And like I shared, the seasons have been all over the board as well. So we just finished our soccer season, which they hadn't played for over a year, and sports are now just starting to get back into the swing of things. Of course, we had American football and basketball because those are the big revenue generating sports here in the US, but many of them, the smaller sports, have been almost a year without competition. So there's been a lot of hurdles that athletes, not only those looking to come to the US, but those that have already here have had to face. So when you're looking at a university here in the US, like I shared before, all the levels, no matter which level you're looking at, are going to be competitive. So when you're looking for that right university, you want to make sure that you find that right academic fit. Is it the right level of academics that you're looking for? If you're a top student at your school, and you've got great grades and a great test score if you've taken it, then those top ranked academic schools are perfect for you. Make sure that it's a great social fit. That it's in a place that you'd like to be. Coming across the world, you want to make sure that it's going to provide you with everything you need as a young person. When you're out of school, when you're out of sports, what does that area provide you? Do you want to be someplace hot, cold, in between? We have options everywhere. Always look at the division. If you're able to play at a higher division, but do that after you make sure you tick your boxes academically and socially. Don't lock yourself into a division if just because you might get into a lower division D1 school like Eastern Illinois, but you've got great grades and want to be a doctor. MIT might be a great fit for you. And Mark will talk a little bit about the divisions in a few minutes on how they differ and what the differences between them are. When we're talking to coaches, the first thing they don't ask us about is your athletic capability. They want to first know about your academic level. They want to know your grades. They want to know your test scores. Then they want to know how you are as a person, what your character's like. When coaches are recruiting, they might have 50 kids that they're looking at for one position. And that's how they narrow them down. They look at grades to make sure that, are you coming over and not going to be a liability in the classroom? Character-wise, they've got a lot of choices. So they want to make sure that you're going to do what you need to when you're asked, that you're going to be a self-starter. You don't have to be perfect in either, but they want to make sure that out of all the options that you're going to be a good fit. When you're talking to coaches, they're learning about you and want to make sure that you're going to be a good fit with them and their culture and with the team. But also you want to talk with them and learn to make sure that they're a good fit for you as well. So make sure that you're ticking all those boxes when you're looking at the right school for you. Why coaches look overseas? If you look at rosters, they're becoming more and more international. And they're looking overseas because they know, A, that students from high academic schools like yours have a better academic level than a lot of kids here in the US at lower end high schools. The maturity level is usually without question higher internationally. Many Americans, 17, 18-year-old kids, when they go away, they normally don't love the sport. So they're just really playing because their parents wanted to get help with the scholarship. When they get to university, it's usually the first time they're ever alone or away from home. And there's an epidemic now of kids that go away, and by Christmas time of their freshman year, they've quit their sport, they've left their university, and just can't come home to go to a university close to home. So they know that if you're going to make that commitment to come from Mongolia or Asia all the way over to the US, that you're committed to be there. And whether or not you stay there for 4 years or not, they know that while you're there, you're committed to be a great student athlete within their university. Lastly, another thing that you get is a benefit on the academic side. So it's a shortcut with the application process compared to a regular student. You get sometimes different requirements as far as your grades and your test scores are concerned, but more importantly, it just puts you into a quote unquote special lane. For example, Harvard University, if you are just a regular student, their admissions rate is 5%. For student athletes, that bumps up to 89%. Because you get the help of that coach to literally walk your grades down to admissions and say, hey, this is someone that we really want part of our program. Let's make sure we can get them in. Many of those coaches at high academic schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, MIT, they will look at your grades before they even talk with you, just to make sure that if they're going to spend the next 6 months recruiting you, that at the end of that 6 months, if you decide that they're the school for you, that they can get you in. Otherwise, they've just wasted that 6 months when other students that could get in, might have committed to somewhere else. So use this process if you're able to get into these schools to get in front of the regular students and to get into schools that maybe without the sport you couldn't get in. The other thing that these schools provide you are academic advisors that will help you before you even arrive on campus the first time. They're going to make sure that they schedule classes, that do not conflict with your training. They're going to give you study hall periods that are just for student athletes, tutors that are just for student athletes, to make sure that you can balance both things, that you can do well in the classroom as well as you can in the sport. So they want to make sure that you have everything covered when you come over, and there's not going to be any issues. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about the divisions, scholarships, and the athletic benefits that they get?
Sure, Chris. Thank you. And like Chris said, one thing to keep in mind is that we have over 2,000 four-year universities that feature sport and scholarships. So as we go through all this, yes, there's challenges, but there's so many opportunities. We recommend keeping an open mind. And like Chris talked about, talk to any and all coaches that express interest and learn about these opportunities. Within those thousands of schools, the schools are divided up into divisions. Largely, the division that the school competes in is dictated by American football and basketball, because they can generate a lot of revenue for the university with sometimes TV contracts. University of Michigan football gets 100,000 fans a game in the fall, and the stadium is on campus. So imagine going to that school, and on Saturdays in October, you have 100,000 people like 100 meters away from your dorm room. So it is a very, very big deal. So what they've done with all those universities divided up into divisions, our approach to the divisions is that when we talk to our clients, whether they're at university or having graduated, is that the division never even comes up in our conversations. It's about the relationships they made, how they were able to contribute, of course, their degree program and the relationship they build with their professors and their teammates and their coaches. There's so many other things in our experience, in our opinion, that are much more important than the division. To give you a snapshot of the division and how scholarships work, Division One is a lot of schools you've probably heard of: Stanford, UCLA, the Ivy Leagues like Cornell, Yale, Harvard, Dartmouth. Division One can give scholarship for their sport. They can also give scholarship for your academics. And then the Ivy League, for example, will do what they call needs-based aid, to where they'll literally take a look at your family finances and determine if there's a legitimate need for financial assistance. And believe it or not, you can oftentimes earn quite a bit of money and still qualify for needs-based aid. Division II schools are schools like where I competed, actually, Cal State Dominguez Hills in Los Angeles, like Rollins and Eckerd in Florida. The big challenge with Division II schools is a lot of them are state facilities, so the academic level is not as high as some of the D1s and D3s. And because they are state funded, Division II schools oftentimes have limited budgets. So that is a big challenge. They are very good schools. It is a very, very competitive level. So don't discount D2. But again, those are some of the challenges you'll run into. Division III are a lot of is called our academic division. And one myth about Division III is that they don't give scholarships. They do actually give a lot of scholarship, but it's through academic aid. So based on your test scores and your grades, they'll give you academic scholarship. But again, we oftentimes see the academic scholarship in Division III be more than what a player might earn with academic scholarship and or sports scholarship at Division I or II. So do not discount Division III because you hear that they don't give scholarships. They do. They give actually a lot of scholarship money. And those are schools like NYU, Caltech, Emory, Bates, Carnegie Mellon. Out of our Forbes top 100 best academic schools, 54 are Division III and 46 are Division I. And some of these Division III schools are some of the best academic schools in the world. And then there's another organization called NAIA. Again, it's just another place that four-year universities can play. Tend to be a lot of private schools, a lot of smaller schools. And because of that, they have a lot of flexibility in admissions and also how they give scholarship. Schools like William Penn, Bethel, Kaiser in Florida. We love NAIA as well because, again, it offers a lot of flexibility. And again, ultimately, it's going to be up to you to find the right fit. But like we said, we politely caution you is don't get caught up in the division. It's very easy to do, but that's going to be the least of your concerns when you get there because you're going to have your focus on studying, competing, getting your proper rest, eating right, studying, around the clock if you're at these high-end schools. So again, don't worry about the division is our perspective. To move into the athletic benefits, Chris talked about a lot of the academic benefits to being an athlete. As an athlete, people are mostly surprised at how professionally we run things here. Your school will always have a proper coach that's hired by the university. You do have eligibility requirements as far as certain grade point averages you have to maintain, and that's all overseen by the university. You get to travel in a nice coach to games. Sometimes you even fly to games. That's all provided for in addition to your scholarship. Actually, when you're traveling, you get meal money, believe it or not. If the coach doesn't take you all out to eat together and pay for it, they'll literally give you meal money for a couple-day road trip. I remember when I played, I think we got $20 for like a 3-day road trip. And I thought I won the lottery. Like I thought I was going to go buy a house and fancy cars and all kinds of stuff with $20. But you're just not used to getting money like that. So it is a big, big deal. We've had clients that show up for their first day and check into their dorm room, and they have a big suitcase just filled with gear from the university, from sweatshirts and hats to boots and you name it. I mean, thousands of dollars of free gear that they get to keep year in and year out that's provided for by the university. Universities have sports psychologists available now, fitness coaches, again, athletic benefits. They have what they call athletes' villages on campus to where they might even have a bowling alley, a swimming pool with barbecue pits. I mean, they understand that you're contributing a lot more than a regular student to the school, and they want you to have time to unwind. They know that it's important to recover and relax as well. So you'll see as you start exploring opportunities that every school is different, of course, in the resources they have, but it surprises everybody just how professionally things are run here. For example, Chris and I are able to watch a lot of our clients, and Jeremy too, on ESPN Plus on TV. And a lot of times the coaches will give your parents, passwords to where they can stream games live and still tune into all your games, even though, they're hundreds of thousands of miles away. Well, maybe not that far, but thousands of miles away. So it is a really big deal because of that. And because it's all put together so well. So many kids around the world want these opportunities, not to mention that we have 330 million people here, but there are a tremendous amount of opportunities if you keep an open mind.
Thanks, Mark. So how do you get noticed and how do you get recruited here in the U.S.? And there's been a number of ways. Obviously, there's been internationals that have come to the U.S. for years. but it's becoming more and more difficult. Back when Mark and I went through the process, was all before the internet, so we literally had to handwrite letters to send them to the coaches, and A, hope that they actually got them, and then B, that they actually came out to watch us compete. But now it doesn't matter whether you go from UCLA, Notre Dame, or any university here in the US, you can find contact information for any coach on the website, which means that these coaches are now getting bombarded by emails from kids all around the world. Schools that you've never heard of are getting anywhere between 50 to 100 emails a day, and schools like UCLA, Notre Dame, those schools that everyone knows, are getting upwards of 300 to 400, 500 emails a day. During COVID, we were talking to some coaches who said that they were getting anywhere between 600 to 800 emails a day. So the reality is how do you break through that noise when they're getting that many emails? Well, the first thing that you want to do is make sure that no matter where you're located in the world, send out emails when it's daytime in the US. So that way you might catch a coach at their computer and just so happen to be reading their emails when you send an email in. That's the best way we've seen to get in front of a coach. Now, the other side of the coin is if you get an email back, how do you determine if that email is really interest? So for instance, if Mark decided he wanted to email Notre Dame, Mark might get an email back that says something like this. Hey, Mark, thanks so much for your interest in Notre Dame. Here's a link to our application. Here's a video of our campus, and here's all the degree programs we have. We'd love to have you be part of Notre Dame next year. Now, that doesn't mean Notre Dame's recruiting him. It just means that Notre Dame just wants him to become a student there. In many cases, these coaches are ambassadors for the university as well. And even though Mark might have emailed them to be part of the soccer program, he really just wants to go to Notre Dame. So they don't want to upset him by saying, hey, you're not good enough for Notre Dame. They're just going to send all the information that they have about the school. The reality is, and we just started work. We were working with a young lady from England who's a 2021 graduate, and before she started working with us, she got emails from 11 coaches that all looked like they were interested. But when we circled back to those coaches, only one had interest in her. The rest of them were either done with their recruiting class or really didn't like her, but just felt that they had to because the university wanted them to send something positive to her. So that is what we usually see, is that a lot of people that try to do this on their own either get frustrated because they're not getting any emails back, or get all these emails and focus on the ones that you might not turn into anything, meanwhile leaving all the other options behind. For sports like basketball, volleyball, soccer, any team sport, you'll need highlight video. And Mark and I probably watch 100 to 150 highlight videos, every week or so. And many of them are usually way too long. We've seen some that are 20, 30 minutes long, and some of the best clips are at the 25-minute mark. Coaches will never watch that much video. On average, and we have all the stats in our video platform, they watch anywhere between 45 seconds to a minute. If they don't see what they want in that first 45 seconds to a minute, they're off to the other 1,000 videos they have in their inbox. So no matter what sport you have, pack your video and we would say don't make it any longer than 2 to 3 minutes. Pack your video with as many of your best highlights at the beginning to grab their attention. Now, those coaches might ask you for more video. Maybe if it's a team sport, they might want to see, a half a game or a full game of unedited video. But they'll ask you for that if they like what they see in that highlight reel. So again, short and concise on the video, and make sure, again, if you were a coach, what would you want to see if you were recruiting yourself for soccer or basketball or volleyball? Those are the things the coach wants to see. Another way is the college ID camp, is what we talked about before. But reality is that many of these ID camps are not used for recruiting. They're really used, again, to get you on campus, put that sweatshirt on, make you spend a couple of days to see what life's like on Stanford, UCLA, or Notre Dame's campus, and then ultimately end up not recruiting you. On average, depending on the school and the sport, most coaches are recruiting anywhere between 2 to 5 athletes a year. Now, they have their own network of kids that they're going around the country and world seeing. They've got people like us that they trust sending them players. They've got former players and students that are providing them with athletes. So the reality is that you show up for an ID camp, there might be 200, 300 kids on that camp. Not everyone at that camp is going to be recruited. And in many cases, let's just say if you showed up this year on Duke's campus for an ID camp, Duke soccer is done through 2023. So even though you might think that they're done recruiting for or that you're there to be recruited for 22, they're done. They're not going to tell you that, but they're done. So, the reality is use those camps, just like we just said. If you're being heavily recruited by one of those schools and they want to see more of you, then make that journey to be part of an ID camp. If you want to just spend a couple of days on campus to see what that campus is like, come in and enjoy your time on that campus. But don't feel that that's the only way you're going to get recruited, because the reality is that very, very few kids get recruited out of ID camps. And then lastly, there's obviously working with a company like us that can help you with this journey. Now, there's two different types of recruiting companies. There's the passive recruiting companies and active recruiting companies. The passive recruiting companies are sites like NCSA and Captain U, where you basically go online, you create a profile, put your video, put your grades and your contact information, and then hope that coaches either come to your profile to recruit you, or then you use that profile and send it out to coaches. The reality is that most coaches, especially at the top academic schools, will not go to that website to recruit. And if they do, it's usually a lower level assistant coach, which really doesn't have that much power. Or you're going to have that same struggle sending that information out to coaches in the same manner. There are about a 1.5 to 2 million profiles in all sports on that page. And we actually have a partner in London that went to school with the CEO, and she shared to him that out of that 2 million, they place about 4,000 a year, which if I just said, hey, we place 4,000 kids a year, sounds really impressive. But when you look at how many kids are on that site, it's really not that great, considering that there's probably 300,000-400,000 for every year group that's on that site. So again, use that if you just want to have one place to put all your information, but it's really not going to get you that notice if you just rely on coaches coming to that site. Now, there are also a lot of different types of active recruiting companies, and we are an active recruiting company. Many companies, and we talk with kids that have worked with other companies, many of them never ask the families what their grades are or what the kids' grades are. They don't ask about finances. So they might provide you with 3 options that aren't great fits. And they're like, hey, we've provided you with multiple options. These are your choices. When we assess everybody, and we do a free pre-assessment, we assess kids on 3 different manners. We look at their grades, we look at their athletic ability and their sport, and then their finances. And we've come up in the 10 years that we've been doing this, a formula which works 100% of the time. So if you have great grades and not a lot of money and a good level, then there's some great options for needs-based schools like the Ivy League, like Bates, like Amherst, that can be a great option for you. You can also have low grades, but have a good level, and then also have some money, and there's going to be options for you there. So there's always a way that we can help you, and we'll provide you with a true assessment if you talk with us and say, hey, with your grades and your ability, we can find these types of schools for you. And in our 10 years of doing this, every athlete that we have ever worked with has gotten multiple scholarships that are targeted to the criteria that they've shared with us. Last year, the average was 7. So we work really, really hard to find those right fits for them. And we're lucky enough to say that in the 10 years also that we've been doing this, we've had no athletes as of today that have transferred from the schools that they've committed to. Even if they've stopped playing their sport, they still stayed at that university because it was a good fit for them. And making sure, and that's, as we shared before, the most important part of this process is finding that right fit for you. So when should you start looking at the US, and is it ever too early to start looking? Well, like I shared earlier, coaches are already looking ahead to the 23 and 24 recruit, even though some of them might not be able to talk with you before the summer before your junior year. That doesn't mean that they still aren't recruiting. We currently have several 2024 athletes on our roster that we're already getting interest from schools and getting their information in front of them. So it's never too early to start. The earlier that you start gives you more options, more scholarship dollars that are available, more schools that are still recruiting, the more opportunity for them to see you live, especially with all the issues currently with competition. It gives you more time to compile video or to go to your competitions to get your times or to play golf or those types of things that you need to do. And it just gives you less stress during the process. Is it ever too late? No, we've signed some kids in the last few months that are graduating this year and have still gotten them offers for this year. If there aren't that right fit, there's always the ability to take a 6-month or a 1-year gap. And with the new COVID rule, there are a lot of coaches that are even now saying, hey, we might have a few kids in the next month or so decide that they're leaving, and then we're going to have a couple of really major needs for August. So it's never too late to start looking, and it's never too early. If you want to get in as early as you can, just because, like I shared, it's better to have more time doing this process than to try to get everything that you need in, let's say, 6 months or 8 months. Mark, do you want to share a little bit more about our process, how we assist every athlete, and what we do to help with the recruiting process?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. And like Chris said, it is very much a numbers game. And, what do you have? You might have something in your game and in your personality that stands out, but how are you going to get that coach to know that? That's where we come into play. So we would work as an agent on your behalf. Like Chris said, we'll do the free assessment up front. We'll agree on the pathway moving forward. And then we're going to get you into the coach's email box or on a phone call. These are personal relationships that Chris and I have worked very hard to develop over the last 10 years. So they love working with our clients because they know that if you're working with us, you know how the process is going to work and you're going to manage your responsibilities. This is very much about getting things done. And if you come here to play, you'll hear coaches say, a big phrase they use is take care of your business. Just get it done. Most players, they don't want to worry about. Sure, your goalkeepers and your strikers, you always got to worry about them. But most of the time, again, they want you to put in the work. They're there to support you, of course, but they're also managing their entire program. So the easier you can make it on coach that you research the school before you get on a call with them. If you're going to get on a call with coach, we highly recommend video calls. They just do so much more to build the relationship than a regular call. Get on a call with coach and have questions. They believe it or not, they really do feed off of your energy. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss is they're like, well, they're recruiting me. But yes, they are. But this is very much a two-way of building relationship. Do you have what they need and want? And do they have what you need and want? So we really help facilitate that. And I think most importantly, we help you manage your energy. We'll let you know when to use your energy and other times where you can save it and focus on other things. And I think that's a big part of where people kind of get things messed up a little bit is they'll focus their energy in the wrong places. And like Chris said, this isn't just about time and money. Your energy is very, very valuable in this. And you don't want to get all burned out on pursuing dead end opportunities. We'll get you in the mix with coaches right away that are interested and also help support you along the pathway. Just like any industry, the recruiting process has a lot of its own quirks and nuances that are very difficult to understand unless you're in it every day like Chris and I are. We'll always be honest with you. And we know that this is a huge move potentially for you, coming a long way to a whole new environment. And we want to be a part of your team and really help support you in that.
And just to add to that, I think the other most important thing is that no matter what sport, you are really the one that needs to be leading this process. And even though you've got a great support team with your instructors and your school and your parents in this process, the athlete is the one that needs to manage it. They need to be the one that connects with the coaches, that communicates with the coaches, that does everything, because that's the coach is looking and seeing how self-sufficient you are before you arrive on campus to make sure that you're going to be at least that self-sufficient when you arrive on campus. And that's usually anyone that we work with that has issues with the process or those that allow their parents or someone else to manage this process. So that's really the one thing that I think Mark and I can add is that if you're going to do this, whether you're working with us or doing it on your own, is that make sure that you're the one leading this. You're jumping on the calls to learn as much as you can about the schools. You're communicating with the coaches. You're making the decision, because ultimately, even though your parents might help pay for this and get you here, you're the one that's going to be on campus for 4 years and competing. So you need to make sure that it's a good fit for yourself. Jeff, I think we're ready for questions if you are.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you guys for your information. Most of the questions have already been answered. So I have a few here. So there's a question here. How much does engagement in the community come into play in the admissions process, leadership roles, volunteer work, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. I mean, obviously for the regular admissions process, that anything that can give you kind of a leg up to the competition helps. Obviously on the athletic side, it's a little different because the coaches really are just going to be looking at at you as an athlete and what you can bring to their team. So that's the one unique thing about this process, is that in a lot of cases, and we talk with a lot of schools worldwide, where a lot of the students are first applying to school, and then once they get in, they start connecting with coaches, and by that time, most of it's usually too late, because the coaches would have already filled their their roster by then. The one thing that it does help is that obviously the coaches will also have that community relations aspect to their team, so they will already like that you're already doing that, whether that's with your high school or on your own. So it definitely does help with the admissions process, and it's something that it's another arrow in your quiver, so to speak, with the admissions process.
Thank you. Ms. Eggy, you can ask your question.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for highlighting the importance of the academic grades and also the best fit. This is my favorite term I like to use when I counsel students finding the best fit university in terms of academically and socially. And also as US unis, when they do the admission evaluation, because they do the holistic admission, yes, academic grades are important, and also for having the students doing their research and to really make sure that the school is best fit for them. And thank you for highlighting that. I appreciate that. So my question, you've mentioned that in terms of admission and acceptance rate by different universities, for those selective universities having 5%, and going through the shortcut, they bump in the admission acceptance from 5 to 68%. If you can explain more, elaborate on that. And also if in terms of, because I have been told by my colleagues that uni admission office people that in terms of students applying for sports scholarship, they have to start reaching out to the unis, even also through their school coaches at high school, as early as possible, starting grade 9. And, when we do as university counselor, when we do the university research and career, all this counseling starts in grade 9, but when we actually start the application process is at the end of junior year. And then, we start the early admission and regular decision, all that in the fall of their senior year. So what would be, if the students were to do this on their own with the help of their high school coaches, reaching out to be recruited for a sports scholarship, where would they find access information in terms of that schools, like what sports scholarship they're providing, and in terms of what kind of requirements and all that, details? How can students have access to those information if they were to do that on their own? And my second question is, besides merit scholarship and need-based scholarship, sports scholarship, how are they evaluated? Is it part of the admission team evaluation, or is there a separate admission department where the sports faculty or athlete department does the separate application review? If they're all done it together? If my question are my
Sure.
questions.
So I'll start with the first one about the different percentages for student athletes. So a lot of universities, especially those high academic schools, will provide each sport and each coach what they call a push, which is where they can actually take that application and advocate in admissions. It varies. Every school is different on how much power or how little power they give the coaches. But for instance, last year, Dartmouth men's soccer had 2 pushes. We had one of our athletes that got one of them, and then they brought in another international. Other schools have different criteria, like Bates College in Maine. Every year it's different. So maybe this year they might give it to golf. Next year they might give one to volleyball. So it really varies at each school. But the reality is that most of those schools will actually have that ability to take the grades and have them pre-read. To answer your third question next, that also depends on the university. So for example, Jeremy was the person in the athletic department that worked directly with admissions, that was the first person that looked at those grades. And a lot of schools have that. They'll have an admissions person that is just strictly for athletics. where they get that first look. And in many cases, what will happen is if they do start early, and let's just say they've committed early, we've had some athletes that committed 2 years prior to them graduating. They know that by the time that application deadline hits in their final year, that they're going to be accepted. So it makes that process go that much more seamless. So each school, and it's tough to say that it's an overarching rule that every school does it the same way, because every school has different, obviously admissions criteria and how they do things. And the larger universities obviously have more resources than the smaller ones. But that's usually how it works. Is how they've got that admissions person that'll work directly with athletics to help them through that process before it even gets to the main admissions department. And then the other question that you had is about them doing it themselves. I mean, the one thing that it makes it as difficult as possible for recruits to do it on their own is that you can get all of the information you ask on the athletics website from a particular school. So you'll be able to go on to, let's just say it's a tennis player. You can go on to a school and look first at their roster. Do they have a lot of international athletes? Because if they have none, or let's just say it's the University of Michigan, but every person on the team is from Michigan, maybe that coach doesn't look overseas for recruiting. If it's track and field or golf or a sport where it's delineated with times or something along those lines, a lot of schools will have a recruitment page where they'll share some of those criteria on the website. So that way, if you're running a 7-minute mile, maybe the University of Texas isn't a place for you to go because they're looking for, 5:30. So there's a lot of different things that you can utilize as far as resources that are on the website. And then obviously reaching out to a coach early on, some coaches will respond back as long as you're within the time frame that they are able to. So in Division I and Division II, it's June 15th of the summer before your junior year. That's when they can actively email or communicate with recruits. Before that, they can't, unless they're just sending out invites to ID camps. Division III is a little different because they can speak with athletes at any point. But the issue at Division III is most Division III schools aren't as far ahead as Division I. So even though they can talk to a 23 or 24 graduate, many cases they don't know what they're going to be doing at that time. So they're usually only a year or two ahead, rather than some of the larger Division I schools that are sometimes 2, 3, sometimes 4 years ahead. Jeremy, I don't know if you've listened to some of the answers that I had about the admissions. Do you have anything to add that I might have missed?
I actually didn't hear I missed that. But I would say, I know there was a question there that's kind of talking about the community engagement and what type of role that plays within admissions. And it actually plays a pretty important role, especially when it comes to athletes. You don't want to fall into that stereotypical category of people who are like, I do sports and I go to school, and I do sports and then I go to school. And we want to see about the engagement you would have on our campus, especially at a smaller campus. The amount of engagement that you'll have in other aspects of the campus, we want you to come and do that. We want you to be leaders on our campus and community service organizations and student government and the multicultural organizations on our campus. Like, there's a lot for you to be engaged with. And that's one of the beauties of going to a smaller school, especially a Division III school, where you now have time to be a college student, not just an athlete at a college. So that's one of the benefits of that, because you do have time to be able to take advantage of those other opportunities that are available. When it comes to the general admissions, I would say we are going to look at the actual application to the application is vitally important. You have to put the effort into the application, showing your academic abilities, your community service abilities. The writing that you do is very important, especially at a high caliber institution. We want to see that you can actually write well. Now, it doesn't have to mean that you are someone who can come in and, be a Nobel Prize winning writer. Like, no, we're not. That's not what we're looking for. We want to see you have a good foundation that we can build upon. And if you have the ability to do that, then you're in a good place. So it makes you have to put a lot of emphasis into making sure that essay is really strong. And then especially now with COVID, and there's less likely for students to have the opportunity to be able to visit a campus, being able to show that interest. A lot of times the general term for it is demonstrated interest, but we want to see that you are not just throwing an application our way. You're actually engaged, you're interested, you know something about the school. Being an athlete and having had that engagement with the coach the coach is going to relay that information to the admissions office. So you already have an edge there, but we still want to see that you're more than just the sport. So it's helpful to have a communication line with the coach as well as a communication line with your representative in admissions.
That's great, Jeremy. You guys mentioned a free assessment from you guys, right? For, there's a few student athletes here, but there's a lot more that, couldn't participate right now. For anyone who's not here, what would they need to kind of have ready to send to you? And then what can they expect in return from that free assessment? Like what does that entail?
So basically what we usually will do is we have a questionnaire which goes through some basic questions like, what your grades are, what degree you're looking for. And then obviously if they've got video for a team sport, even if it was pre-COVID, they can send that. And then if it's track or, anything that's a delineated time or handicap or things like that, they can send that information to us as well. One of the questions on there is budget also. So that way we can take a look at all of those things and then provide them with an assessment, which basically lets them know, say, hey, based off of what we see currently, we think that you're a Division III athlete, and these are the types of schools with your grades that you might have a fit at. Now that doesn't mean those would be the only schools, but it's just giving them kind of a snapshot of the types of schools that they could be. And then from there, usually what we do is we'll set up a time to talk with them and their parents, and then share more information about how we work and the packages that we offer, and then also at that point circle back another time, and if they want to move forward, then we're at a point to where we can decide if that's right. We have turned down a few athletes in the past that weren't at that level, and whether they want to use us or not, I mean, obviously taking part of that free pre-assessment, I think is very important, because even if they want to do this on their own, it's not worth wasting valuable recruiting time going out to schools if they're not at the level that they're at the schools that they're emailing. So whether they want to work with us or not, it's great to contact us, or if you'd like, we can send you all of the information for the pre-assessment and then share that with your students. And then once we get that questionnaire in, we can contact them to provide them with more information.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Specific question: if you're looking for a soccer-specific scholarship, first part of the question: should you play for the school? Should you play club? Can you continue with your multi-sport participation, playing all three core sports: volleyball, basketball, soccer? And in that short video that you have to send, what are they looking for? When should you start working on that video? And how can the coaches help with that?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing Mark and I really do like is we love the fact that athletes at schools like yours are multi-sport athletes. I mean, that's how we kind of grew up as well. And then it wasn't until we were in high school to where we kind of focused a little bit more as we got later on. But we've worked with a lot of athletes that are at a school that are international schools or private schools that are playing multiple sports. And in some cases, they're good enough to come over in both sports or multiple sports. But if, let's just say they are a better soccer player and they're looking for soccer, we would want to see game footage if we could. We have assessed soccer players or other players with training video. We're looking for things that the coaches are wanting to see, the mechanics and how they strike the ball, things like that. Goalkeepers are a little bit easier when it comes to training video. And then obviously, we've worked with kids from Asia that only play 7v7 on small fields. And then obviously others. So, we know that there are limitations, but, coaches, are some coaches are pretty particular at the level that they're looking at because they're wanting to bring the highest level that they can. But there are so many options out there that there are schools. That's the one thing that we've seen is that, schools like yours, you have more kids that can come over than you think that you do. Schools like, especially team sports schools, if they're very high academic, Caltech, I mean, arguably one of the best schools in the world, their soccer team, you can be a little bit below, let's say a Trinity, who's also Division III, and still come over. So we'll talk a lot about that in the assessment. And if we don't see what we need in that initial video, we will delay, as long and ask them to send us more. So that way we want to make sure that if we're going to give you an assessment, that we're confident enough that it's going to be successful, and also make sure that if they did sign with us, that we're going to have success ultimately for them.
I'm just seeing Ben's question in the chat. It says, in a sport like basketball, if due to the height at the school, I'm assuming that means the height of the other players, like your peers, then you're kind of pushed into a role that you would never play at university. How would you deal with something like that? Maybe I'm guessing if you're the tallest kid in your school, you might be playing center, where you're not tall enough to play center at the college level.
Yeah, I think that's what happens to quite a few players, to be honest. For example, like say in soccer, a lot of your top players tend to be like center midfielders. When you get to college, obviously they're going to have center midfielders, and it's important to be adaptable. I would say even in a sport like basketball that has less roles, of course, that again, the way the coaches are looking at it is that it's a big term we call upside here. So when they look at you, what is your upside? If you come play for me at university, can I use you in a different role than you're playing now? For example, in basketball, are you a center, but you move really well? So maybe I can move you to a shooting guard, and you're very athletic and you can get up and down the court really well. We've had guys that have gone from shooting forwards to point guards because, like you said, they just fit into that system a little better. That basketball is extremely competitive here, kind of being our sport, so to speak. But I think we do see players jump around positions when they do get to the college level, and it's important to be adaptable. So, for example, if you get to college and you're typically a forward, but maybe the shooting guard gets hurt, and they're like, listen, Mark, get in there and see how you can do today at shooting guard, and you do well, suddenly that's your role, and it's your role to lose. So it is good to understand different roles and to be adaptable, because when you get to college, you might not just play the position you're used to playing. So to answer your question, we do have that to where kids are playing a certain position for their high school, but then they might play a different position for their club. And we think that's a good thing. We think it's very good to be adaptable.
Thank you. We're nearing the end. So if there's more questions, just put them in the chat. If not, we're going to wrap it up very soon. Personal question, more for us athletic directors here. We work at some smaller schools, have a lot of different hats to carry during the day. We teach, we coach. What are some of the simple structures or systems we can put in place to support our athletes? Do you have any tips for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, obviously, this is a great start, is providing as much information and realistic information, to the kids that have come over, because that's the one thing we see a lot of is, especially at international schools around the world. I mean, there's athletes there that, are the best of the best at their school or in their conference. And, that doesn't necessarily translate to Notre Dame and UCLA, but there are options for them. So I think that, that's the big thing, is providing the kids as much information about the realities of this process is I think is very, very important, because even those that maybe have started the process on their own, there's a lot of misinformation out there from a lot of different reasons, or from a lot of different areas. So I think that for me, that's gonna be the most important thing. Mark, anything that I might have missed?
Yeah, I would just say, like Chris alluded to, for administrators and coaches and athletic directors, is to just keep recommending to your student athletes to keep an open mind in their discovery of these new schools. Like Chris said, you don't have to go to UCLA or Duke or Virginia to be a legitimate college athlete. Jeremy played, Division III football. I played Division II soccer. There's a lot of successful people, doctors, lawyers, teachers, athletic directors, coaches that didn't play D1. And I think personally that the growing you do at the college level is based on the responsibility you have. And don't get me wrong, there's guys sitting on the end of the bench at D1s that are still enjoying their experience, but you want to get on the field. You want to get on the court or in the pool to represent your university and compete. I was very fortunate to play every single game in college, started over 100 games, and had the chance to maybe go transfer to a D1 after my sophomore year, decided to stay at my D2. And, there's no guarantee that if I went D1, I was going to play at all, let alone full time. So I think just dispelling, like Chris said, the myths about the divisions. This is a very, very special and unique journey that, like Chris said, is driven by you and your passion and your love for working hard and for your sport and for education. And don't let too many other people get in your head. Don't worry about social media. Don't worry about hashtagging stuff. You know, when you get here, you're going to be working 6 days a week on your academics and your sport and maintaining a good, healthy life. And you're not going to care what other people think, to be honest with you. You're going to be too busy doing what you do. So I would just say encouraging kids, like we talked about, there's over 2,000 four-year universities that feature sport here. And you know, we could never commit to one now, is what Chris and I say, because we're always looking at these schools optimistically. We can find something good about any university. And so it'd be very difficult for us to decide now. But again, I would just go back to, it's a very unique and personal journey. And don't, you know, encourage the kids to not let too many other people into their head.
And just to add to that, I think the one thing we on a documentary that we recently saw, there were some college counselors that basically said that, you know, even though if you can go to a high academic school, it's great to go to those, but you make out of your education what you want to make out of your education. So you can go to a school that, you know, maybe is a you know, high academic school that maybe you had never heard of before, but still get the same, you know, the same result after graduation than if you went to Harvard. Just because there are a lot of options. That's one of the things that the recruits learn so much about, is that the coaches will share just a lot about their program in the university, but they'll also share a lot about what that school can do for you when you graduate, from the internships, the alumni network that they have to help you with careers. And then, you know, if you do want to go to be a doctor or an engineer, then after you're done with your 4 years, you know, playing, then you can go to your Columbia or your Stanford or your Berkeley to get your master's degree to further your career. So I think the one thing that we've talked about this whole conversation is keep an open mind with the schools, and you can get as much out of any school that you go to than you can if you just decide, hey, I'm just going to go be a student at UCLA or at Harvard.
And the one quick thing I would add onto the back of that is, let the education be the driving force. There are a lot of students I met and I recruited that had an opportunity to come to a great school that I was working at Trinity, and they chose to go to a very, very poor academic school because it had D1 in their athletics program. So let the academic drive you to where you want to go and what options are there based off of what your needs are, what you feel your goals are, and what you want to succeed with, because the odds are that you're not going to have a professional career as an athlete. I don't care who you are, the odds are not in your favor in that situation, no matter how good of an athlete you are right now. But I would willingly bet on you academically to go to a place that's really going to help you to be able to achieve what you want to academically. So let that be the driving force. And if you can find that place that marries the two together really well to allow you to achieve what you want academically, have that amazing career like what I was able to have. But even though I didn't go play pro, it really gave me all these strengths and these benefits of networking and people skills and learning grit and being able to work with a team that allowed me to be successful in my career, as well as having a very strong education. So let that drive your search, and as an AD, guiding your students towards schools and support that are going to keep that at the forefront of their focus, as far as like what we are doing to make sure that your education is kind of what we're going to use to really drive what you want. We want to be able to have those things match up together. There's rarely a company that's going to say, you know what, we won't work with you because you're athletically, we can't really get you to the type of place that you want to go, because they're money focused and we're actually academic focused. So it really allows you to know that we're going to look out for the best interest for you, both as a student as well as an athlete. So yeah, that's my piece there.
It's awesome, Jeremy. Thanks for that. All right, guys, we're coming up to the end of our time. Just really quick, if any of these students or maybe any students wanted to reach out and work with you guys with Ethos, specifically, where would they go and how would they do that?
Yeah, so you can email us at info@ethosrecruiting.com. Or better yet, what I will also do is I'll send, can I place the link for the questionnaire for the assessment in the chat as well? And then also I'll send it to you guys so that way you have it. And if you want to share that with anybody, they will be able to connect with us directly. As soon as we get that form, we will contact them to set up a time to talk. And then obviously, if we can get video or information to do that assessment, we'll do that prior to the first call.
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, yeah, thanks guys for your time. I really appreciate it. There's a ton of great info here. They'll hopefully help, the kids that were here and also any kids watching. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for everybody, we will put all the links in the description of our podcast on YouTube. Thank you all the students here, Ms. Aggie and Chris, Mark, and Jeremy. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and we hope we can help some students from Mongolia to go to the US in the future.
Great. Thanks so much again.
Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.